Welcome back, everybody. It's Brad G here, aka Banana Slam Jamma. We'll be fixing that channel name as soon as we can. But today I've got an exciting video for you that's going to be talking about farming patterns in the new map. And I'm going to be showing you guys two replays from the 5 to 15 minute mark, coming out of the laning stage, working up to your early game items, and showing you how professional players, two of the best in the world, being Dyrachyo and Satanic, have elected to adjust their farming patterns to the new map. So we're going to be including one replay that utilizes Lifestealer, a hero kind of like PA, Jug, Anti-Mage that doesn't generally farm very fast with their kit. Then we're going to be using a replay of Magnus, a hero that's kind of like Luna, Sven, a hero that naturally farms fast with their abilities. I think this will distinguish which type of farming patterns they have. We're going to see some similarities, and we're going to be giving you some tips and tricks to make sure you guys have all of your ducks in a row in the new patch, and you know what to look out for. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So first, we've pulled up into Satanic's replay. He is the Lifestealer, and we're tuning into both replays at 5 minutes. One thing I noticed in both replays, you'll see it in the Magnus one as well, is that both players utilize the small camp a lot around this time. Around this time, a lot of the supports have left their lane, so what that means is the carry is kind of left alone. Now, keep in mind, everything I mentioned with timings, this is at the absolute highest level, at the pro level, so things are going to move faster here. You may need to scale your timings back the lower MMR you go. So it could be as late as 6 or 7 minutes, or even 8 minutes that this happens in your games. But I want you guys to be more so paying attention to the progression of the game. So this is largely due to supports leaving lane and the carry needing this because the supports have left lane. So the small camp by both of them is going to be used in order to pull the lane back when it's near the tower. The reason why it's so important to pull the lane back, despite being a hero that farms fast, in this case Lifestealer does not, is because in the past there was a small camp and a medium camp back here. And it was relatively easy to access from the tower. Like, the camps were like here and here relatively to where they are now. But now, there's a freaking ancient camp here, guys. So, it makes the retreating path less efficient for carries. And oftentimes around this stage of the game, when carries had some backup option, like the alchemists that were really good at farming those camps, they no longer have that. So I feel like right now, the two delegations of carries are ones that can farm ancients with just levels, and heroes that can't. So for the sake of it, Lifestealer is a hero that can't do that. Yeah, you could farm this camp right here, but compared to the past where you'd be farming two camps at once in proximity to the lane, it's just not very efficient. So absolute emphasis on having access to the small camp at 5 minutes, okay? Because it's the only like retreat path that you have when you can't lane. So I will say, guys, at the highest level, you're likely to see the support having de-warded and controlling the small camp. If you're a carry player and you're in the lower brackets and this isn't happening, first you can ask your support to make sure the small camp's open in 5 minutes. But if not, I'm imploring you to buy yourself a sentry before the 5 minute mark, de-ward the camp, and make sure that you have this accessible to you. So once they pull the lane, right, now the lane comes into their tower, and this allows them to actually get some farm in lane, because they're no longer having to walk up. His support did come back, but the whole idea of the lane remains true. So bear in mind, one thing we're going to notice in professional pubs is that when you have a hero that can't really farm very fast, but also has a slow or gank contributing potential, like Lifestealer, like PA, right? I'm seeing a lot of ganks to the safe lane from the mid lane, because mid laners are often getting level 6 much earlier than side lanes. I feel like that balance of like which core has more impact is heavily favoring mid right now, due to the 1v1 island that's happening there. And so what happens is in a lot of these games when you have the Lifestealers and the PAs is the mid comes top and ganks. So just be ready for this when you're playing these type of heroes. You can even call for it. If you're a mid laner, keep an eye out for it. These are just important things to consider, that these carries don't have other options. So when you're trying to enable them, a quick gank and leave is fantastic. But if you're the carry and this isn't happening for you, totally chill. You can just do what Satanic's doing here, where he got the lane nearest tower and he's just farming, right? Yeah, he'd be a bit more contested if there was no gank, but he'd be doing the exact same thing regardless. So what happens here when you're a hero that can't really farm fast, but you're generally pretty survivable? He had two options here. He could have pulled the small camp if he was a more squishy hero, maybe like PA at this stage of the game. Or he can look to play up in the lane like this. So like this is the area that he seems to be playing. I personally think he missed a pull here. Based on I would be playing up here if I had heroes with me. I'd be playing back here if I didn't have heroes with me. So this is a small thing to note. He's going to go back and farm the small camp anyways, right? But that's because there's 2v1 here, and he's been like proven that there's nothing he can really do in lane since his teammates are not here. The big emphasis about all of this, guys, is that this camp existing is absolutely essential to like not just having nothing to do in the early game. So notice how whenever the carries go to this camp, they have two choices in the early game right now. They're either going to see that the lane is pushing into their tower and they're going to go scoop up the creep wave, or the lane's going to be out here like it is and they're going to go to the large camp. Those are really the only two choices. So playing around small camp as your basis and then either looping to here or going back to lane if the lane's back here, right? So he's going to farm the large camp and then he's going to go back to lane underneath his tower, maximizing efficiency since he knows the lane's going to come back to him into him since there's no large camp. He's going to push it out immediately and continuing this whole like playing where this is what option this gives him. Notice how this is the two choices he has now. He pushes out the creep wave, right? Remember, this is like 2 or 3 minutes after the supports have broken down the lanes. Whenever that 5-minute window actually starts in your given games, he now has the choice after clearing this wave, which is really important to see that he just cleared the wave, to either go back and farm these camps now because he's got like decent levels and some items, right? Or he can advance forward to pressure, and you're going to see that he does that because he's got teammates. Like, he literally backs off and then turns around. So in that moment where you turn around, you can check the minimap and think, is my team ganking for me? Is my team pressuring this area? Did the offlaner TP away? Because if the offlaner TP'd away, you would also do this, right? You're either having a huge clash here or there's nobody on the enemy team here. Then he advances in the lane, right? And he's then going to contribute to the gank in a meaningful way. They kill the DK. Fantastic. And now the new minute mark starts, right? Where it's 9 minutes in. So the farming pattern seems to be that you push out the lane and then you go big camp, small camp. When the lane is back here or you're weaker, you're going to go small camp into big camp into lane or small camp into lane, depending on where the lane is that we mentioned earlier. So these are like the general paths that you have the option of, and it's really important to see like why they are and doing certain things. So after the large camp, he's going to play the lane out like this because the lane was right near him, and he's just chilling, right? His mid really wants to help him, so he's going to keep pressuring, playing up in the lane, setting up for himself to farm the big camp again at 10 minutes. So it's really important to note that on these heroes, it's a lot higher skill, in my opinion. It's more reactionary to what's happening in the game. When your teammates are around you, advance in lane and go through the jungle or do the large camp. When your team is not there or the enemy's outnumbering you, you're much more playing around the small camp, looping back into the lane like this, right? So when you play these non-farming carries, this is the type of thing you have to consider in the new map. And it's all because those camps behind you just aren't very good for you now. A lot of these heroes could have at least taken down the medium camp in some pseudo-efficient way, but that's just not the case anymore. So notice, push the lane out, big camp, small camp, loop back to lane, right? Over and over and over, the same thing, utilizing these two camps heavily. And just keep in mind, if you're getting significantly pressured, as long as you have a small camp, either the offlaner is going to be taking your small camp, which allows you to lane, or you'll be able to pull the small camp so that the lane can get back here. So one thing I'm noticing that both carry players did, despite the situation in the game, who's winning or losing, despite what hero they are playing and the manner that they do it, because I mentioned that the mid lane is so impactful right now, given like how many resources seem to be going mid lane one way or the other, both carry players are consistently looking to TP mid. So that's why it's so important to attack the way forward, always be looking to weave into the jungle, because it's freeing you up to potentially make these type of TPs. Now, I know this may not seem like a farming pattern type thing, but it seems like right now, if you're a carry player, most of your rotations are no longer through the twin gate, as a lot of them were in the past patch, where if you were going to make a play, that was it. Maybe you guys were never doing that. It's fine. But right now, bear in mind that around like 8 to 12 minutes, keep your eye on the mid lane, because this seems to be where all the brawls are happening at the highest level. And what that means is that those are generally going to be the most impactful fights. Your games may not resemble that these fights are happening, but if the fights are not happening here like this, it's unlikely that it's efficient for you to go there. So notice how he's going to TP mid here. We're going to see a similar example later with a different hero and end up turning that into a really nice engagement. Notice how his items also reflect this. So a lot of the carries right now that are good are carries that can do this type of thing, and they can also contribute to fights. So we're seeing Tiny carry contributes to fights early. We're seeing PA carry can TP in and blink dagger people, right? We're seeing Lifestealer, we're seeing DK. Think of all of these heroes and what they have in common in this regard. They can all go to an early fight, get some cleanup kills because they have like a stun or a slow, and do meaningful mid-game damage with the items that they build. So that's what we're seeing, right? Is the rush of the armlet so that he can do just this. So, the common trend after people go mid is that they do just go straight back to their lane once the fight is over. And we're just going to resume what we were doing before, right? Where we're going to push the lane out, look to go big camp, small camp, back to lane. You see this? It's the same thing over and over again. The stronger you are, the further up you're willing to go. Notice how he's actually pressuring the tower rather than retreating to camps. Why is that? Because his team is here, right? So once you push out the lane, you're either going to go retreat to the camps and farm because your team's not there, or you're going to pressure the tower because your team is there. The decision is always the same. You guys can give yourselves these little like checklists. Push out lane, where is team, you know, and push if they're there, back off if they're not. Like, these are little things that you can give yourselves as checkpoints for making decisions that I think will be super helpful in the new patch because there's just so many new things going on. A lot of these things are like historically fundamental things, but keeping an eye on them as like the basics to follow in the new patch, super important in my opinion. So at some point in this area of the game, both players kind of break down this farming pattern around the 15-minute mark, right? Where he's going to TP to a Wisdom Shrine fight, you know, clearly being willing to contribute to the game. And this is where the game kind of breaks down. What I mean by this is at this point, there's going to be a lot of unpredictable factors where maybe you stay at the Ancients because you TP'd here. Maybe you TP'd mid for this fight at 14 minutes and you go right back to the safe lane. I would say if you end up TPing to Wisdom Shrine or down here somewhere, then you're probably going to go Ancients right afterwards, okay? If you ever go mid, it seems like carries are just making their way back top. Obviously, the reverse would be the case on Radiant, right? So if you TP'd here, you'd run back to here. If you TP'd here or here, then you'd end up in this like ancient farming area here. So that's the first example, utilizing a hero that does not particularly farm fast, that does not look to use the camps behind you very much. That's what you're looking out for. Bear in mind, these are here. They're inefficient, quote-unquote, for these type of heroes, but you may end up being stuck doing this. But I really think you can play the lane as long as you have this camp and you haven't egregiously messed up the lane. Going into the next replay, we now have Dyrachyo, the other top tier carry right now, playing Magnus. Remember, it's important that I am emphasizing that this is a hero that can farm Ancients with just abilities and maybe one medium tier item. And that's the archetype of hero we're dealing with right now. Because that is the type of carry that can retreat and farm efficiently. You can either farm Ancients or you can't. We just have to reiterate that distinction in the new patch, right? So, look at where we are. 5 minutes in, clears the wave, doing the exact same thing we saw from Satanic, where he's going to utilize the small camp. The difference being here is instead of pulling the small camp, he farms it because of what's going on here, where there's a creep drag and there's a pull going on here, right? So rather than focusing on getting the lane back, he is still going to heavily utilize the small camp, but then he's going to go to the big camp afterwards because he knows that the opponent's been doing these shenanigans. So the small camp is there for efficiency. It is absolutely essential to get that extra injection of gold, but whether or not you pull it is purely based on what's going on in the wave. Is the opponent, like we saw in the previous replay, staticking the wave over here where they're not trying to push it into you and you don't feel comfortable going there because it's scary? Or is there like some random shenanigans like this, or they're pushing the lane into your tower, you know, these type of things. Basically, if it's not this. So speaking to the importance of the small camp, you're going to see quite the 5-head play coming out from Dyrachyo, but all I want you guys to take away from it is that the small camp and pulling it is really important when the lane is pushed, okay? So he's actually going to pull this catapult that was with him at this large camp, and he's going to use the aggro of the catapult to pull his creeps such that they're here when this camp spawns, such that he can pull them. Pretty 5-head stuff here. Utilizing that early cleave to actually farm a medium stack here. Like a lot of, like, depending on what cleave hero you're playing, you could have just maybe farmed this. But now the lane's back in front of his tower, as we were mentioning, right? But now we're going to see the distinction happen between the two archetypes of heroes, right? We've got a cleave hero that can farm ancients, and the previous one we didn't. So now at 645, rather than focusing on the large camp and the small camp that we saw the Lifestealer doing, he's actually going to retreat and stack this camp for himself, and then go back to lane with the time that was between creep waves, right? So what's going to be important to note is that creep waves are every 30 seconds. So between the ones that are at that end at 15 seconds, like you're seeing here on the clock, he's going to go do the farming pattern we saw with Lifestealer, but he's going to start with the small camp since he's starting back here. It's like if you're starting in here, you're going to go this way. If you're starting back here, you're going to go this way, right? So now he's going to go to the small camp because of the fact that he was near his tower at the 15-second mark creep wave. And since he farms the camp really fast, he has time to go back to the creep wave, only missing one creep. Now it's the 745 wave again, right? And he's going to go stack Ancients. Boom. And notice what's going to happen here is that he's going to farm the Ancients this time because his item that is used to farm Ancients is coming out. So keep in mind, he has 2 kills, so this is a super early Mask of Madness. So perhaps you're starting this process a minute or 2 later. Perhaps you don't farm Ancients until 10 minutes because of the fact that you have a slower Mask of Madness. But this idea that instead of just doing these camps and like starting here and rotating here, he does these 2 camps within the time span of 1 creep wave, goes back to the wave, and then on the other creep wave goes up here. And then he can also utilize this camp, and we're just going to see what happens here, where instead of laning all the time, going back and forth, he's going to do the same farming pattern, but now the lane's pushed back into him. If the lane wasn't pushed back into him, I'm sure he would have gone here, or he would have gone here, right? So he can efficiently farm jungle camps. These are the ones that are available to you. So cool thing about this farming pattern is he's going to push the wave just like the Lifestealer. And then he's going to go back to Ancients first rather than medium camp. What's really important to note about these camps is that even though they're technically worse on average than the previous 2 camps, especially how early you can farm them, it's much harder to get back here now than it was in the previous patch, especially since the Twin Gate used to be like right here. And people would like be able to see you from the Twin Gate on the camps you used to be farming. But now the Twin Gate's all the way over here, which just means it's that much less likely that the opponent's ever going to show up here. But if they're going to show up here, it's through the Twin Gate. So a really cool tutorial lesson here, tip that Dyrachyo's giving us, is that at this time in the game, when he's starting to rotate constantly back and forth between the Ancients and lane, he's going to give himself a ward and a sentry, and he's going to place it on the one place that he knows people would gank him from. Goes back to lane, not missing a single lane creep. Resuming the farming pattern like this, right? But instead, since the lane's cut, he's going to go here first. Noticing how he's only went here like once or twice, and it was because the lane was consistently pushed into him, and that's because it was Darkseer, right? Darkseer, a hero that Ion Shells the creep wave. There's a lot of offlaners that kind of just consistently push the lane into you. It's like Sand King, Underlord, Darkseer, Necro. I think you're kind of getting the idea of the type of hero that will do this and when you can plan for this. And notice how he's even contesting the camps, which is pretty cool, rather than just letting the guy go free. But the whole idea of this is that it's this loop. He's not missing a single ancient camp because it spawned at 10 minutes, right? As long as he's getting that, then your farming patterns are solid. He's going to push out this wave. Where does he go from here, right? Shocker. Back to the Ancients, right? Not missing a single one. Getting the stack off. Farming this camp at the same time. Double stacking. Really cool on specifically Magnus. You could probably do it with like Luna Beam. You could probably do it with Tiny Tree Toss, which you don't really want to do since he needs that to farm. But the little double stack thing, he's not missing a single camp back here on the minute mark. Now that his support's here, rather than going back to lane, he's just going to retreat through these jungle camps, which don't feel amazing because of the fact that there's one less camp back here. So instead of going all the way back to the corner, and he's really strong, he's like #1 net worth in the game by a large margin, he's injected so much net worth with these camps, he's actually going to go farm the next big camp. And the cool thing that we saw with Lifestealer was since he farmed slower, he had to TP mid. But look at this cool farming pattern we're going to see. So here's what's happened, right? We started here, we went like this all the way back to here, and now since we had a support come to lane, we've got more items, we've finished these camps with plenty of time to spare. So what does he do on these flash farming carries when he's run out of camps in this area? he's actually going to go to the rune fight at 12 minutes. That's kind of cool. I know this is a professional match, but the point of the fact that both of these carry players are so heavily emphasizing looking to TP mid, looking to go mid when it makes sense for their hero, it's such a big difference that he did this, where he went through this area to this camp. He farmed the whole way here, right? Rather than going here to here, right? Big difference in terms of passivity on the map. So he's going to go mid, have like an active role in this team fight. Get the 2-man RP, which isn't bad at all. And since it was a mid fight, as we fast forward, he's just going to go right back to top. He actually TP'd top to get here. And resume what the Lifestealer pattern was from last game, which is like through this area, emphasizing to actually make it back for the Ancients in time. Wants to farm both these camps. Didn't even miss a single Ancient spawn, by the way, after going to a mid fight. That's the power of these flash farming carries when they have a really good start. Making sure he clears this area, going back to lane. This is like the ideal setup, right? Now, bear in mind, you're not Dyrachyo, you're not like 15k MMR, and you might be getting pressured without getting any help from your teammates, but this is what we're going for. These are the dream farming patterns for a hero that flash farms, right? Now that he's laying against two heroes, he's just going to go back to the small camp, as we mentioned, then back to wave rather than contesting them there. And what's he do now, right? There's no ancient camp. He already farmed it. Do you notice the similarity in the farming pattern he's doing right now? He looked at the timer rather than doing like this because he's already cleared these camps. So this is like really far out of the way. He then makes his way towards mid again, guys. That's pretty cool. Here he is making his way towards mid for another rune fight. Doesn't end up getting the amplified damage, sadly, but sets up a fight for his team where all the abilities are cast on him. And sure, he goes down, but his team gets 3-for-1 trade. So this is what I'm loving about what these carry players are doing. We see such a showcase of the efficiency of this map. By seeing that they don't go back here, they are confirming to us that these camps on average are just kind of shit, unless you have that extra time to take this camp and this camp. Especially noteworthy that he's Magnus, so he's like skewering over cliffs because there's a lot of terrain that's really inefficient here. And looking to go mid with their rotations. And around this time in the game is when things break down. But I think it's super essential that we see what these carry players are emphasizing in the early farming stages. So I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown of two of the best carry players and how they're adjusting to the new patch. Looking at the new farming patterns in lane, which camps they're using, where they're looking to go, which seems to be mid lane, not really through twin gates or any other rotations, no other TPs when necessary. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. And let me know what you guys thought. Bye.